Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to you, wherever you are in the world. I am Tigress Osborn. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, or NAAFA. Welcome to the NAAFA Webinar Series. If this is your first time joining us, let me just tell you a little bit about NAAFA before we get started with our guest today from Dove. NAAFA has been working towards changing perceptions of fat and eliminating size discrimination for over 50 years. Founded in 1969 and still doing it, y'all, still doing it. We are the co-founders of the Campaign for Size Freedom, which you'll hear a little bit more about in just a second. And we do the rest of our work through education, through other kinds of advocacy, and through community support. We are able to do this work with the generous contributions of people in our community and allies. We are predominantly run by volunteers, and we thank them for all the hard work that they do for fat liberation. And we thank you for all the ways that you show up to support. If you'd like to learn more about supporting us or more about the work we do, you can find out all about NAAFA at naafa.org. I also want to wish you all a happy Fat Liberation Month. In August, we take time to celebrate badass fat people and all the ways that we are coming together to support each other, and also all the ways that we are thriving despite the stigma and stereotype that we face. Today's event is one of our Fat Liberation Month offerings. We have several more virtual events to go, and you can also find that information on our website. I'd like to introduce you to our colleagues and friends from Pro Bono ASL. Our interpreters today are Brianna and Amber. Pro Bono ASL does important work towards accessibility, and you should also support them. You can find them on their website at probonoasl.com. Now, let's get into talking about beauty inclusion and size freedom with our partners at Dove. First, I want to actually ask Brandy Solovey, who is our co-founder, the director of our co-founding organization for the Campaign for Size Freedom, to introduce herself. Brandy?
Thank you, Tigress. As Tigress said, I'm Brandy Solovey. I am the director of my law office's project, which is Fat Legal Advocacy, Rights, and Education, also known as FLARE. And also, as Tigress said, we are co-founders of the Campaign for Size Freedom as well. And I am also the director of, the supervising attorney of Homeless Advocacy Project, which is part of the San Francisco Bar Association, as well as the director of Independent Living Resource Center San Francisco, the legal director there. So thank you all for being here today, and I am excited for our conversation with Dove.
Thanks, Brandy. Melissa, would you introduce yourself next?
Sure. Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Melissa Grevstad, and I'm currently the head of brand purpose for Dove in North America. And what that actually means is I lead all of the social impact initiatives that Dove has been building and developing for the last 2 decades.
Thanks. And Dana?
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Dana Paolucci. I'm head of PR and influence for Dove in North America. I started on this brand a couple of months ago, but have actually been working with Dove for many, many years on the agency side. So it's been a long time for me, and I'm actually very grateful to be here today.
Thanks, Dana. And Hannah, would you also tell us about yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Hannah. I am a licensed therapist, as well as an activist and educator and content creator on all things fat acceptance and fat liberation. I am also a Dove ally on the Campaign for Size Freedom.
Thanks, Hannah. So let's talk a little bit about the Campaign for Size Freedom. FLARE and NAAFA have worked together as partners for many, many years on a variety of initiatives related to the rights of fat people. And this year we partnered with Dove. Dove has a long-standing commitment to working on appearance-based discrimination. And so we partnered with them and got their support to launch the Campaign for Size Freedom. I want to make sure that everybody here knows that it was it's very intentional that we talk about Dove as the support partners in this. They are actively supporting us, but we are all in agreement that the campaign for size freedom, as it relates to representation and fighting for the rights of fat people, should be led by fat organizations. So we're really excited to tell you more about what we've been working on together and a little bit more about how we ended up here. This is a first of its kind partnership between a major corporation and any organization that we know of in the fat rights movement ever. So this is really unique. So let's start with Dana or Melissa. How is this work on the campaign for size freedom connected with the brand's other work, especially promoting the idea of real beauty?
I can jump in, Dane, if that's okay to start. So Tigress, great question. So there's a little bit of history here. So back in 2004, the Dove brand made a pretty significant strategic shift in how it was going to show up with consumers. And what we did was we put purpose at the heart of everything we do. And that purpose was defined as making a positive experience of beauty accessible to all people. That's it. It's summed up in our rallying cry that we use, which is let's change beauty. And it's a very, very simple call to action, but it has a very big responsibility. So Dove historically has always stood in this very firm position and point of view that beauty should be a source of confidence, not anxiety. And for 2 decades now, we've been pretty committed to providing superior care through our products, but also championing real beauty and challenging narrow beauty standards in a whole host of activities that we do. So we've always been very committed to continuously learning how it is that we can best support some of these efforts in terms of redefining beauty, challenging stereotypes, dismantling narrow beauty standards, battling bias, and in some cases, even creating or fighting to change legislation that may exist. One of the other key elements of our history is in the same year in 2004, we actually established the Dove Self-Esteem Project. What that actually does, its work is completely focused on helping the next generation, so the young people in our world, to develop a positive relationship with the way that they look. So the folks who initially started that collaborated with a whole host of renowned experts in body image and leading universities to develop evidence-based tools that are academically validated. We've actually been identified and recognized by the UN as the #1 provider of self-esteem education in the world. These tools are free, they're accessible to all, and they also do include a fair amount of representation across all kinds of body sizes and various dimensions of diversity. So to date, our Dove Self-Esteem Project has actually reached 95 million young people in 150 markets around the world. We're pacing very well on track to hit our target of 250 million lives reached by 2030. So it's a very, very big initiative, but it's also a defining element of what it is that we do on our brand purpose, because we don't just, communicate our point of view, and we don't just say things, but there's a very clear commitment and long-term action that underpins everything that we do as well.
Thanks, Melissa. And Dana, can I ask you then to make the connection with everything that Melissa just said, but specifically how that means Dove wants to show up around the issue of legislation and size discrimination?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Melissa said, I think broad strokes, like Dove is pretty widely known for challenging beauty standards, and we have this overarching mission, making a positive relationship with beauty accessible to all. And we do this in many different ways, many touch points. We do this through campaigns. We do this through our partnerships and our partners. We do this through research. These are just a few examples. And I think one of the more like aha moments for us last year, we released a study. It was called The Real Cost of Beauty Ideals. And the study really revealed and unearthed the devastating impacts of appearance-based discrimination, which included weight discrimination and body size discrimination. And really, it showed up as a widespread public health crisis. It really showed the impact of appearance discrimination on society and on the economy, more particularly, was what this study really unearthed. So it did show that body size discrimination affected 34 million people in the US. And obviously, you know, this plays a significant role in fueling the self-esteem crisis, which is very, very important to the brand. And I think, you know, as someone who lives in a larger body, it was no surprise to me that 34 million people in the US were impacted by body size discrimination. But I also think this type of research and report done with Striped at Harvard and Deloitte Access Economics to really, like, you know, back that up, was something that people outside of the community might not have realized or realized was such a significant issue. And so I think it's really important for us. We really believe that tackling body size discrimination is a very critical next step in our mission to make this relationship with beauty a positive one and accessible to all. And it's very core to our belief as a brand.
I think I remember the first time I saw that statistic from y'all about the 34 million and feeling like that seems low based on my experience. And I think to a lot of in our community, you know, who encounter this kind of size discrimination every day, that does seem really low. But one of the things that we've noticed is that often people do not self-identify what they're experiencing as discrimination. You know, they think of it as like an interpersonal issue instead of a systemic issue, instead of an issue of like legal rights. And so I think it's really important to talk about it that way. And I thank you all for talking about the public health crisis being discrimination. We are all very used to hearing about ourselves as a public health crisis as though we are the public health crisis, right? Not the systemic bias and stigma that we face. So, so I think that's a really important thing to highlight about the research that you all worked on. Can you talk, a little bit more about like I just want to make sure we've fully made the connection of the sort of like, why now? What else is there to the, like, how did we all get here together in this partnership?
Yeah, I can jump in. So building on what Dana was saying in terms of that piece of research, there was a couple of, there's usually, well, there always is a few different points of light that we take a look at as we start to assess how is it that our mission and purpose is being lived and manifested in the world that we live in. And, you know, quite frankly, it was very clear that the body positivity movement that Dove, you know, really worked to champion and help to fuel and amplify, probably way back in the early 2000s, almost 2 decades ago, it had evolved and it had changed. And the reality was that those who were being most impacted or required it the most were actually being left behind. So that, in addition to the work that Dana explained that we did looking at the economic cost of the impact of dissatisfaction and discrimination, you know, started to give us some signals that there was something that we needed to do. So we've been working on addressing the issue of body size discrimination, looking how to sharpen our focus. We also spent a lot of time doing a lot of work on trying to understand what is the best way to lend our support to this topic. So, you know, as Dana was saying when she was referencing the research, just a couple of stats that I can share just in terms of how prevalent the issue was becoming. Some of the numbers are truly, truly staggering. So, you know, we had seen that there started to be a bit of a cultural tipping point that was going on with something becoming so seismic and so true to the lived experience of so many people living in this country. So the statistics that we gleaned through our research, 84% of adults, 84% of adults, almost all adults, 90% of women living in larger bodies, and 88% of girls aged 10 to 17 have at least once in their life been shamed because of their body size. And additionally, just building on the point about discrimination, women and girls have often faced discrimination because of their body size. 78% of women living in larger bodies and 71% of girls. So those are staggering, staggering numbers of people living in larger bodies and experiencing, you know, true sort of toxic pressures related to how they appear. And that sort of links back to what I was sharing earlier in terms of the mission of Dove and our mission and our mantra, to, you know, to change beauty. And what we're constantly trying to do every day is to, you know, identify those toxic forces that are, you know, perpetuating these negative stereotypes and perpetuating this discrimination, and find ways to both try and dismantle them, as well as give people tools to become a little bit more resilient, as they face those directly. So anyway, that's sort of the crux of the work that we did, and we leaned in particularly within the space of legislation, because from all of the work that we did in partnership with you all, in terms of where was the action really needed, it was really in that legislative space, given the complete almost lack of any legal protection around this issue. So, while there's still pending legislation happening in 4 states, we know that especially 2023 has been a pretty pivotal year, especially with the passing of the legislation in New York City. So we're thrilled to see that, and we really just feel like this is really only the beginning of things to come.
Mm-hmm. We're also really thrilled about New York City, obviously. And as we talked about what we would share with the community today, one thing that I didn't think about is that we might have some folks here who are not as familiar as we are with what legislation already exists or what laws already exist. So just a super, super quick recap for those of you who are newer to this issue. There is no federal law in the United States protecting people against height and weight discrimination. At the state level, Michigan has the oldest civil rights law with the Elliott Larson Act. And then in the state of Washington, there are some limited protections through a Supreme Court decision related to designating obesity, in quotation marks, as we always do around here, as a disability. And so we won't get into all the complications about why that is not our ideal way of passing legislation in this session, but you can learn a lot from us about that in other places. There are also 7 municipalities that have some kind of protections through appearance-based discrimination or through explicitly naming height and weight as an area that cannot be discriminated against. And you can find all of that information on NAAFA's website if you want more of those details. So thanks for letting me segue with this sort of like magic school bus teachable moment for a moment. I'd like to bring Hannah's voice into the conversation, and just want to see, Hannah, if you have any thoughts about what the Dove folks have been sharing so far.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the question you posed earlier about like, why now? Like, why is this the right time for this kind of work? And I think that we are really in a prime position that as the FAT community that we have never been in before, because of the work that FAT activists have been doing over the last 50 years, right? This is a pretty obvious human rights issue that gets overshadowed by bad faith actors and people who try to derail the conversation. And through the tireless work of the FAT community, I think a lot of FAT people feel much more emboldened to share our stories openly, both about interpersonal and systemic discrimination. And I think a lot of non-FAT people have become aware of an issue that maybe they have never taken the time to think about before. And so I have seen a huge shift in the narrative around body size politics over the last even 5 to 10 years, where people are starting to understand it's not just a hurtful comment from one person to another. It is a systemic issue. It does have real ramifications. It is a political issue. It has consequences that can range from people being denied rights and resources, employment, housing, all kinds of things. And that really is the core of why this is important and why this needs to change. And I think people are starting to wake up to that.
So let's dig in a little bit more about the Campaign for Size Freedom. Melissa, will you lead us off on this question about just a little bit more about why this project with Dove?
Absolutely, my pleasure. So just building on what Hannah was just saying, we at Dove absolutely acknowledge that, as I mentioned earlier, there's a bit of a cultural tipping point time that is happening. There's a coalescence of a few cultural markers that we're seeing that are probably the culmination of many decades and many people's very tireless fight in this space. But when we elected to lean into this space and offer our support, it was a very intentional decision to look for organizations such as your own and such as the FLARE Project that were really authentically leading and had the credibility and history really driving this movement. Dove's intention very much so is not whatsoever to be the hero in this story. We are absolutely the ally to the heroes of this movement. And really what we wanted to do was to be able to bring some of the things that are unique to Dove, our scale, our size, our platform, some of our expertise, in order to try and lift up the people doing the hard work in this movement, in order to hopefully shine a bigger light and get it more exposure, and hopefully drive some of the momentum that is much needed.
I want to highlight a particular aspect of the campaign, or of Dove's support of the campaign, which is the Size Freedom Fellowship at FLARE. So again, for those of you who came in late and you missed Brandy's introduction, Brandy Solovey, the director of FLARE, is listening and will be available for questions later, but is in transit right now. So I'm going to say a few things on their behalf. You know, FLARE has been doing tremendous work, under-supported, under-resourced, all volunteer, as almost every fat liberation space in this world, not just in this country, in the world, is under-resourced.
And Tigress, just real quick, sorry, this is Brandy. I just want to mention, and also I just wanted to point out, so FLARE was actually founded by Sandra Solovey, who is also here today, and has also, she's the one that has done the tremendous work over the years.
Yes, and Sandra, if you're not familiar with Sandra's work, number one, you should be. Fat Activism Hero. And also Sandra's book, Tipping the Scales of Justice, is available. It came out many years ago, but actually because we've had so little movement on, so little progress on the legal aspect of fighting anti-fatness, it's still really timely today. So I encourage you to get a copy of Sandra's book and take a look at what she has to say. And then definitely visit FLARE's website for other information about other projects that they have been working on. But let's talk a little bit about the fellowship. Brandy, since you are able to come on, you're welcome to just jump in wherever you see fit here. But Melissa, let's have you talk about it from the Dove end.
Sure. Okay, well, we were pretty thrilled to be able to support our first ever fellow on Dove, and support the first ever fat discrimination fellow as well. So it felt like what we understood was a very authentic and needed way to support the movement. So we obviously work closely with yourselves at NAAFA and also with the FLARE project to really understand and unpack what was going to be most needed as part of this movement, where our support would be most utilized. And we found that supporting this fellow was necessary to progress the work from a legislative standpoint. I think, building, Tigress, on what you had mentioned earlier, there is an absence of adequate legal protection in this space, in this country, and that really needs to change. So the Size Freedom Fellowship launched this year, and it will utilize legal strategies, research, and community engagement to effect meaningful change in policies, in practices, and public perceptions that perpetuate body size discrimination. And that felt like a bit of a tongue twister, but there we go. So a very, very rich, broad mandate, all encompassing, in order to drive some advancement in this space of legislative protection.
Mm-hmm. It's really fantastic, and it's really unique in all of the world as a funded fellowship that is specifically dedicated to these issues. And for folks who don't know or who missed the announcements about this, Reagan Chastain is the person who was named as the first FLARE Fellow. Many of you will know Reagan for her work around medical weight discrimination, but you might not know that she has a long history of organizing and legal research and all the other things that are needed to, amazing skill set to bring to this fellowship, while she continues to do some of that other important work that she's already doing. So shout out to Reagan. I don't think Reagan is here with us in the chat today, but shout out to Reagan. And if you're unfamiliar with her work, please do look her up and check her out as well. Brandy, is there anything that you want to add about the fellowship or the importance of the fellowship?
I just think, I mean, what you have said, Tigress, and what Melissa said, I just want to echo. It's very, very exciting to have this first ever fat legal fellow in the United States, anyhow. And yes, we're very excited to be working with Reagan and excited about the possibilities of what can come in the future.
Thanks, Brandy. Whoops, I muted myself. Hi. Lots of opportunities to model imperfection, y'all. I tell you this every time. I would like to talk about another aspect of the support work that Dove is doing through the Dove Allies. Dana, will you tell us a little bit about who the Dove Allies are and what they are doing on the campaign for size freedom?
Yes. Yes. So we have actually partnered with 24 allies as part of the campaign for size freedom this year, throughout the whole year. So these allies include experts, advocates, influencers, content creators from diverse backgrounds, professions, and to really help advocate and drive awareness through our social campaigns and other marketing initiatives for this movement, primarily on social. So, but also in other ways. So, participating in interviews, but really sharing personal stories, and us elevating that on our platforms as well. So our partners have this shared mission of building body confidence, and ending body size discrimination. So really shifting the cultural narratives around body size along with Dove. So our goal is really to collaborate with individuals who can contribute and amplify to the conversation within their communities, but also and beyond. So again, like using our platform to amplify their stories so that more people can see them. And also Hannah is one of our amazing and partners who we're so thrilled to have her support and her expertise, among others who are just fabulous advocates and activists, and really have been on the front lines of the movement to make all bodies equally protected under the law. Some of the other allies that we're working with: fat activist Victoria Abraham, Ivy Felicia, who's founder of the Fat Women of Color platform, Imani Barbarin, a disability rights advocate. And this is really just part of our overall focus, the well-being of women and our community. It's very important to us, and this is a very critical aspect of it as well. And I think an example of how we're sort of activating our community, Fat Liberation Month, we're working with our allies to share what Fat Liberation Month means to them. We're doing a couple of collab posts on the Dove channel to really ensure that our community is seeing these stories. And it's just one of the many ways that we are working with these partners throughout the year.
Hannah, what is it like for you being one of these Dove allies?
I mean, it's been honestly pretty moving and inspiring to see how thoughtful and intentional Dove has been in the people they've selected to be partners. I think it is really easy for a lot of brands to just choose the people with the biggest platforms so that they can get the most views. But it seems very clear to me that they really thought through who represents the fat community and all of its vast diversity, and making sure they are hitting the different career fields, backgrounds, areas of expertise. And it's been pretty amazing for me personally, just because some of the people that you guys have brought on are like heroes of mine who I look up to. Like you mentioned Imani, and I was like so beyond thrilled. And I mean, more people, just that was the first person who came to mind. But it's been really cool to see how connected we are, even though like we have very different platforms and very different approaches, but we're all obviously like in support of this huge, massive goal of changing legislation and creating a better world for fat people.
Were you surprised when Dove reached out to you, Hannah?
Yes. Yes,
Why?
I was.
Why?
I mean, I'm just like, I have a wonderful, like small, I mean, not small, but you know, there are people with bigger platforms than me. Like I am a person who tends to post very like intellectual activist content, and I'm not, you know, making TikToks of myself dancing. So all of that.
Although we love to see it, right?
I love a good dancing TikTok, believe me. But my niche tends to be much more about bringing awareness to things that may be hard to hear and changing the narrative around fatness and things that can be very like inherently confrontational. for people to, you know, accept the fact that like we live in a society that breeds anti-fatness, and like we all have to confront our own anti-fatness and things that can be challenging for people. But the fact that Dove saw value in the things that I post and the expertise that I have, I think was very validating for me.
Will you talk a little bit about what folks who are with us today or who are watching this later on YouTube can do to support fat influencers and to support the campaign for size freedom and Dove's?
Oh my goodness, yes, there's a lot people can do. Number one, I don't know if you've talked about the petition yet. There's a very important, awesome petition on NAAFA.com/size freedom. I would encourage everybody to go check that out and sign it. But also there's a lot of things people can do in their everyday life. I mean, following organizations like NAAFA and FLARE to make sure that you are staying up to date on opportunities to engage is really important. Following as many fat activists as you possibly can, because we are also excellent sources of education and information. But also doing the personal work, right? Listening to fat people, listening to our stories, believing us when we share our experiences. And then doing the internal work of deconstructing your own anti-fatness and then taking that out into the world, right? Pushing back when you do see problems, requesting change of individuals and organizations who may be making life harder for fat people.
Yeah, and especially remembering that we need to listen to all the fat people, not just the ones that are most convenient to us, not just the ones that are socially acceptable, not just the ones who are not challenging us on anything. Like, we need to listen to the fattest fat people, we need to listen to the disabled fat people, we need to listen to the Black and brown fat people, all of the folks that look a little bit different than what mainstream body positivity has come to look like, and that
100%.
has looked like, right?
Yeah. And I would say especially follow those people. If there are people who are challenging you in a way that you've never been challenged before, that is an opportunity for growth. This is like a very classic therapist idea, which is that if you are being challenged, that's an opportunity for growth, right? That is an opportunity for you to reflect and figure out what it is that is like pushing a button for you and analyzing that further.
100%. If you want to check out the Dove Allies, the easiest way to find them is just to look at the Size Freedom hashtag and see what they've been posting. They will be the ones using that hashtag that are also marking their post Dove partners, because they are. But everybody else who's using that that hashtag is y'all. Right? It is our community joining in to uplift the idea of working towards these legal protections, but also fat liberation in general. So please do check out that hashtag on your favorite socials. And also, of course, the Fat Liberation Month hashtag. The Dove Allies are supporting that, but also we're seeing people all over the world using the Fat Liberation Month hashtag this August. So we're just like super, super excited about that. Before we transition to questions from the audience, if you have questions, you can start thinking about them or start queuing them up. I do have a couple more questions for our friends at Dove. I want to recognize that brands are not always welcome in social justice spaces or in activist kinds of spaces. We're not sure what to do with you sometimes, and you're not sure what to do with us sometimes. What has that been like for Dove, and especially around this issue, around the issue of size freedom? How have you heard responses from the public, from consumers, from your consumers, from the press? Dana, will you start us off there?
Yeah, I can definitely take that. So I would say media and journalists have been very receptive, I would say, recently to these efforts. And I know, Tigress, you've been an incredible leader of this movement and really, contributing to press stories when people are really starting to cover the legislation that's really gaining momentum and traction as part of this work. I think we really do have media on side, and they want to learn more and they want to support. And we're seeing some really wonderful things come from press and journalists. I would say social media remains a place that needs some work, in all honesty. And I think it probably won't come to a surprise of most people on this call, but people really feel quite comfortable. Full Instagram profile, photo, open profile, just commenting highly fat phobic and frankly just terrible things. And so
They
it's a
feel
lot of,
so comfortable. They feel
yeah,
so comfortable
it's
saying
really,
no.
it really doesn't surprise me, but it is surprising to a lot of people when you look at the comments. And, you know, I think it's very important for us to protect our allies. So we do really try and be very intentional about where and how we amplify stories, and to really specific audiences, considering our social channels as a safe space in a lot of ways. But I do think there's a lot of work to be done, when it comes to social media and where people feel comfortable commenting, consumers. But we're also okay with, where we stand as a brand, and we're going to continue to speak up about the issue. And I think when you feel really comfortable in your stance and what you believe in as a brand, it's normal to anticipate pushback, and not everyone's going to agree with your stance, but we feel good about where we are, and we'll continue to elevate this message and the movement and the people behind it.
I really appreciate that a lot, Dana. I know one of the questions that I asked the Dove folks behind the scenes, y'all, was like, what does it feel like to be like sort of the poster child woke brand, where like we have a really wonderful media reception, but there's also some particular areas of media where Dove gets, you know, called out as the example of wokeness in the sort of like political woke wars. And I think what you talked about when I asked you that behind the scenes was exactly what you said now, of like, we'll take it. We're proud. we're proud of what we're. Yeah, thank you. I want to also talk. I know that our folks have curiosity about what else Dove is doing to get its own house in order, to be, you know, to be leading, not just in a sort of marketing or advertising way, or even in a purpose way, but also like in a like what do we do around here kind of way. Melissa, will you talk about what's happening internally at Dove, and even at your parent company, Unilever?
Yeah, no problem. So the great thing is we're starting from a pretty solid foundation, and that's always a really wonderful place to start. But we started the hard work as a team to really shine the flashlight on all aspects of our very, very large organization, to identify where there might be opportunities to upskill. So Unilever overall is a very, very diverse company. I think it's one of the things that the company is known for. It's one of the things that when we have new cohorts of new talent coming in and applicants and new hires, it's often cited as one of the reasons that drew them to the company. So we've worked for many, many years to build this and build a very strong, very inclusive culture, which respects every employee for who they are. We've set very clear goals within our company to eliminate bias and discrimination within our policies and our practices, and also accelerating diverse and inclusive representation across all areas of the business. This isn't just sort of tokenism, it's just the way in which we operate. And this inclusivity does also include body size equality. So earlier this year, Tigress, you really helped us kind of take one of these pioneering first steps, and you conducted our first internal anti-fat bias training for ourselves and our interagency network of partners, very large group of people that we link arms with to develop all of the campaign work that we do over the course of the year. And that was a really, really helpful step in helping to equip us, helping to equip the organization, helping to equip us with raising awareness and starting to, really shine a light and take a look at this issue of size discrimination within our brand internally. So both Dove and Unilever, overall do always focus first and foremost on the qualifications and the abilities that are required for the work that needs to get done. And we're always looking to create a culture where everybody can thrive. And I would also say, I've been Unilever over 15 years now, and I truly do say it's not just lip service. It, the core values of like fair treatment, equal treatment, respect, and where uniqueness and individuality is actually valued as a very valuable component to your skill set, no matter, what your race, your orientation, your gender, your size, etc. So.
And thank you, Melissa. Dana, yeah, I was just going to ask you if you wanted to add.
Yeah, like I would love to build on that and just say, I think, our internal practices it goes far beyond what we do as a brand. And I think we really do try and be inclusive when it comes to everything from events. You know, we really prioritize accessibility at our events. Is the seating at our events accommodating of higher weights and different body sizes and shapes and abilities? It's all important to us. Who do we have on set doing hair and makeup and understanding, you know, different shade ranges and things like that? It is kind of permeates all elements of what we do as a brand. Even our creator community, the One Dove creator community, we work with hundreds of creators. It's not just the creators we work with for the Campaign for Size Freedom. You know, we have creators talking about our deodorants and our body washes, and we really make sure that there are diverse representations in that content as well. So I think it really translates kind of beyond internal as well, and all of the elements of our business and what we do. And I would say, for me personally, I have always felt super comfortable internally and with my colleagues, and have always felt like I could talk about my personal experiences, share my personal experiences living in a larger body. And people are so receptive, even if that's not their personal experience, they're very receptive to hearing it, and they want to learn more. And they also are, you know, very behind the work that we're doing for this campaign, and want to continue to accelerate it. So,
Dana, when you went from working with Dove in a different capacity to working in-house at Dove, were you worried about being the only fat girl at Dove? Tell the truth.
you know, I was actually, what I was more worried about, if I'll be completely honest, was you know, kind of being on the outside. I've always had such a positive relationship with the brand, and, you know, every event, every meeting, every interaction I've had with the brand has truly been people first, and really wanting people to feel very seen and having that positive relationship with beauty. And I was scared that I would come on the inside, and we would sit in meetings and that wouldn't necessarily be the case. And it really was. I really sit in meetings and people are like, how do we make this a safe place and a celebratory place for not just people living in larger bodies, but, you know, every single campaign we work on, every single initiative that we do and champion, people really are at the core of it. And that's felt really good. I'll be honest. And I'm also not the only fat girl working on Dove.
I was just thinking, I should clarify the way I phrased that. Yeah, I meant you worried that you would be, but in fact you are not. I don't want to put words in the mouths of the other larger bodied folks at Dove, but in their training with us, they, you know, we talked a lot about why we use fat, and we are very hopeful about how much we are seeing that at Dove too. But yeah, I know that you're not there alone. I think I phrased that a little weirdly. So let's take some questions from our audience. The first question came from Bill, who wants to know about the feedback that you've gotten from other executives and other corporations. Specifically, Bill says, do you get crap on the golf course from people at other companies about like your approach to this work about fat people?
I can take that. I mean, Melissa, you can feel free to chime too, but no is the short answer. I think people do recognize that this does feel very like natural for Dove as a brand to support. And so I don't think there's been as much criticism from like other organizations, other brands. Yeah,
I would say that there's criticism. I would say that there might be curiosity. In terms of how it's going. I think implicit in that is an acknowledgement that anti-fat bias runs very deep, and in a lot of ways it's still treated as very socially acceptable. And I think that, you know, the questions that I've received are more curiosity of how is it, and how does, you know, how do you guys manage it? Is it tough? And do you, you know, what is it like? A lot of the toxicity that emerges from social media, and how do you guys deal with it? But, you know, we had a lot of discussions with our own leadership kind of early on, and the rule we live by is just because it might be a bit difficult doesn't mean we're not going to do it, right? Like, it's the right thing to do, and it might be hard work, but that makes it even more worth it.
Well, and I think that kind of answers another of the questions from the chat, which comes from Lindsay, who says, fat people in the public eye are used to getting hateful comments, but how solid is Dove's commitment to these issues? Are the anti-fat comments or trolls going to undermine Dove's support for weight-related laws? I think you've kind of answered that already, but do you want to say anything further about that?
Well, I think it's a journey, right? I think it's a process. So I think we're not there yet. We've seen some evidence of that toxic behavior, but I actually think it makes us more resolute in finding out what is the right way for us to be communicating this in a way that people will allow us to build these bridges and open the lines of communication and let our message come through rather than just the vitriol and the animosity. You know, we are learning our way. Like in what Dana was talking about earlier with the allies, that was a very, very, very smart and intentional decision to look to the community of people that are living with this experience and starting there and starting to allow them the opportunity to have their perspectives and their voices raised up rather than the brand taking a point of view and wanting to communicate one way to consumers. So I think, you know, it's also the how that we've, you know, I think we've been very intentional about not just leading with our brand, but very much going through the community, which is, I think, has also helped us.
And I'll just add on to that. I think the one thing that we're very conscious of is being unintentionally harmful to the community. So if we would never want something that we post or the comments to move in that direction. So to Melissa's point of like constantly learning how is our community responding to certain things that we post or things that we share on social, that might not necessarily be like originate from Dove. We're constantly like watching the comments, listening, learning from them to kind of figure out, you know, what's the best way to be most productive and have the most productive conversation and raise awareness in a way that isn't, you know, harmful at all. And I think just general on our platforms, there's really no place or space for trolling of any kind. We don't stand for it. And we have a threshold. We'll hide comments if they start to feel like they're verging on very harmful. So that's something that we take very seriously as well. But short answer, no, it will not undermine or stop our support of this.
Love it. Yeah, we know it comes with the territory, but we're really glad to see how resolute you all have been so far about like, if, you know, if they go low, we go back to supporting fat people. Another question from the group, does Dove or Unilever have any of the corporate wellness programs that include Biggest Loser style weight loss competitions or any of that kind of stuff like so many companies do?
We do not incentivize or reward weight loss.
Good, nice and simple. We like that. No. A question for Brandy. Is FLARE able to take on individual cases of size discrimination, or do we need to wait until a federal law is added before there's actually legal options? Is this one of the services that Dove or the Campaign for Size Freedom is hoping to provide? I ask this as someone who has experienced a lot of discrimination because of my size, especially in healthcare. So can we talk, Brandy, can you talk about FLARE's role in helping folks who have individual cases?
Absolutely, Tigress. Yeah, thank you. Great question. So FLARE, you know, for the past 20 years has been able to help individual people as capacity permits, because as we pointed out, you know, we haven't been a funded organization, so it's been all pro bono stuff. But you know, I'm licensed to practice law in California. So legally, I can represent people in California, people outside of California. I can, you know, talk to and consult with other attorneys that they may have in the states that they live in. And, you know, although there is not a federal law protecting
against weight discrimination, and there's not a specific federal law that protects height and weight discrimination, it does not mean that there's not legal protection. I want to be careful and to make sure that everybody knows that, you know, every case is different, every individual situation is different, and there may be protections under the ADA or other disability state and local rules. And so, you know, and those rules may not protect everyone. So that's why, yes, it's very important to continue fighting and getting specific legislation. And our hope is that one day there will be federal specific legislation, but it doesn't mean that there's no way to fight back now, possibly, depending on what your situation is.
People file lawsuits all the time for things that there are not explicit prohibitions of, and sometimes they win and sometimes that helps set some precedent, right? And you know, Sandra Solovey, who we talked about earlier, always reminds us that like there are things that the legal system could be doing now if it weren't for its own internalized weight bias or very externalized weight bias against people. And so you should definitely speak to a legal professional. You can start with FLARE, but you should definitely speak to a legal professional if you think that there is something that you have a case about. We also are, one of the goals of the Campaign for Size Freedom, and I know from Dove's perspective, this is a really important piece, is just uplifting the conversation about this issue. And one of the things we hope comes as an outcome of that is not just that people will be more interested in supporting it legislatively, but people who are legal professionals who already work in the field will think about the ways that they can use their skill sets to support people in these cases. So if you're out there and you are an attorney, think about volunteering for FLARE, or, you know, if you think about bringing in NAAFA or FLARE or others to do, people like Hannah to come and do training so you can work around the, you know, bias that's in the law system in all kinds of ways. We have on our YouTube channel a video for those of you who might be attorneys of a presentation that Brandy and I, along with one of our board members, Elaine Lee, did for the American Bar Association. And so you can take a look at that and then follow up with FLARE to volunteer with them if you've got those skills. Let's see, what else do we have from, how has Dove used evidence-based information, for example, debunking the myth of the so-called obesity epidemic, to guide its work?
I don't know if I'm understanding the question entirely correctly. I think there are two ways that I could talk about this. I would actually say the first one is, so Melissa actually mentioned the Dove Self-Esteem Project earlier, which is totally academically validated. We work with the Center of Appearance Research to build all of our tools. They're tools primarily for young people, but a couple of years ago, we expanded one of our tools called Confident Me. It's used in schools. It was formerly a 5-part program. It's now a 6-part program that teachers and educators can use and kind of educate their classrooms on different elements of social emotional learning. And this 6th lesson was around appearance discrimination. And within that, it included size. And so we most certainly worked with educators and scholars and academics to build that, to ensure that it was actually credible, academically validated, and can really like support young people as well in, you know, understanding both themselves, their classmates, and how they view one another. So I would say that as one thing. We're also constantly as a brand kind of like educating ourselves. You all have Google alerts for, you know, when different stories come out and when things related to the legislation get updated. So I think we do a lot of work and we're very committed to that as well. And then I think also just really leaning on our partners. So, you know, Tigress, you and everyone at FLARE Project, and also our friends at Spitfire who we work with to keep us really informed and ensure that we are using the right tools and the right information out there to inform our work. Kind of a long way of saying it, but. Did that answer the question? I don't know if I did.
I think kind of. I mean, I think what Ali was looking for was maybe a little bit more about how science is Ali put in a follow-up question, how science is scientific information can contradict diet culture. I feel like in my work with y'all so far, like a lot of what we've been doing is just not engaging the question of what science has to say about obesity in any direction. Just keeping the focus on whatever people are saying about the so-called obesity epidemic or the classification of larger bodies as being diseased. Those folks all still deserve rights, respect, freedom, access, all of these. And so I will say, in response to the question, just like from our work with you, that's what we've seen, is that it's not that you're unwilling to look at the science in either direction about body size, but that we're not focused on that aspect. We're focused on the civil rights aspect more.
Yes. Yeah, I was just going to say that, like, we look at things through a civil rights frame, and that's a conversation we're here to have, because we understand that that's really one of the biggest potential roadblocks that really could help the movement to advance and progress and achieve some of its key objectives.
And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all the questions in the chat today. So I'm going to ask a final question from the chat. And then everybody else, if you've put a question in the chat for us, we'll get the answer from Dove and we'll share it out through our newsletter or through our social media posts or something like that, so that you can still get your questions answered. But I want to end with a question from Elaine, which is about Dove's plans to increase visibility of the most marginalized folks in FAT community in advertising and in your public relation efforts. Do you plan to feature more super fat or infinifat people or disabled people or disabled people in advertising, in addition to fat people of diverse races and genders?
Yes, I can take this, and then Melissa,
sure,
we can collaborate on this one. I'll say yes, absolutely. And one of the places that we've been doing this for quite a bit of time is within our creator community. I know I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but it's not just the work on the Size Freedom campaign. It's within our community of hundreds of content creators that are, speaking on behalf of our brand every single day. It's highly prioritized that we are showing diverse body sizes among many other forms of diversity. And it's very prioritized across that work. So I would say like our Dove partners are such a wonderful and beautiful representation of that. And this also, I would also say the people that we partner with from a spokesperson standpoint as well, this is something that we really keep top of mind. And then from sort of like an ad campaign standpoint, Melissa, I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I mean, again, I think it's a bit of a journey. So what Dana was talking about, a lot of this like influencer, social content creator work that's getting done, it gets, it's easy to influence quite quickly because it's happening at the speed of light in a lot of ways. You're finding voices, they're shooting content for you, and it's posted and it's out. I think, I think we're on a bit of a longer journey. I think that we've been pretty proud of the strides that Dove has made. I think in a lot of ways, Dove continues to elevate the bar for a lot of other brands out there in terms of the diversity of lived experiences that we portray, not just within master brand, which is what Dana and I are here representing, but really across all of our product categories. And really, and again, that speaks to the fact that all of our categories really come from the same place of this, of the purpose mission statement that I talked about at the beginning. And that's really the foundation, whether we're selling a deodorant, whether we're selling a product for hair care, or body cleansing, it's all developed with that same ethos in mind. So I think it's a journey. I think we're a lot farther ahead in 2023 than we were when we started in 2004. But even that was pretty amazing progress. It was pretty seismic at the time. And there's still a lot of progress, and we see a lot of upside. There's a lot of appetite to do more of that in the future.
Thank you. I want to give since we're talking about influencers, I want to give the influencer the last word here. Hannah, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to add?
I've just really appreciated how Dove has approached this work. I think it is rare to see a brand so authentically committed to doing good in an activist space. I think that a lot of people, especially people with diverse intersecting identities that may be marginalized. I think we are used to being let down by brands who do, yep, who do like small or temporary or performative things and get credit for not making much change or supporting the people who are. And so it has been really wonderful for me to see an organization really put their money where their mouth is. Oh, my cat is going to join us for this last part. So it's been really wonderful for me to see how committed they are to amplifying the voices of the people who are already doing this work.
Thank you for those thoughts, Hannah. So thank you everyone for being with us. Dana, Melissa, and Hannah are interpreters from Pro Bono ASL, Amber and Brianna. I just want to remind our community that we show up in this partnership with Dove as the same folks you see showing up in other places. So you can expect that we are challenging Dove the same way we would be challenging other folks. We are grateful for their support, but we are not indebted to them in such a way that prevents us from challenging them on things. And so it is really exciting to me to see where this relationship is going to continue to grow. And I hope that you all will join us in that excitement. Please do, Hannah, remind folks where to find you.
You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Hannah Talks Bodies or through my website, hannahtalksbodies.com.
And where should folks look for information about Dove, Dana?
Dove.com/size freedom.
Yes. And spend some time on the rest of the Dove site. Melissa talked about, and Dana talked about how this is not, what they're trying to do is not only within the FAT specific campaign. So take a look and see what you think about the question that Elaine asked and whether you believe Dove is moving in the right direction in terms of representation, and give them some feedback about what you'd like to see more of. And again, please do sign the petition. You can find the petition on Dove's website. You can find it on FLARE's website. And of course, you can find it on our website at naafa.org/size freedom. We look forward to seeing you for some other Fat Liberation Month activities. So please do stop by the website and check out the calendar for what is left in these last few days of August. And then, of course, we will be continuing with some Size Freedom September activities and Latinx Heritage Month coming up in the fall. Thank you for being with us, everybody. Take care.